On this Sega Talk, we pay a visit to Dinosaur Island to discuss the Sega Dreamcast cult classic, Blue Stinger. How did Western fans react to this Japanese-developed launch title on 9/9/99? What are our old man memories of the game? Does it hold up? Or is it best left in the past? Find out on Sega Talk. SegaBits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and...
Sorry, go ahead.
Hello and welcome to episode number 155 of Sega Talk. I'm Barry. And with me is the bearded, orange hat wearing George.
Just CGI the hat on. I wish there was like a filter like on Discord where you pay for Nitro and they put an orange beanie on you.
Yeah, this game's special because I was telling George before we started, like the main playable characters, we kind of look like them. We could cosplay as them for sure.
For the next Sonic event, I'm sure people would understand the costume.
I'm the Blue Stinger guy, can't you see? I mean, honestly, his costume is about as easy as the Columns guy, the Columns 3 guy.
The cover?
Like, look, jeans, slip-on shoes, blue shirt, and then you just gotta ruffle up your hair and then, like, cut your face.
Do you think that if Sega ever brought Columns back, they need the guy that did the cover for 3?
That's a whole other conversation. I don't know who that guy is, and I want to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so on this episode, we're going to be talking about Blue Stinger, and this is a Patreon pick. So, George, plug that beautiful Patreon.
If you guys go to a little website called patreon.com/SegaBits, you can support this show for as little as $1. You get an audio version week early. $5 gives you the video version, and $20 lets you tell us what to talk about. So check us out, and hopefully you support the show. Thank you guys.
Thank you, and thank Michael S., who was our Patreon picker for this episode. His memories are as follows. So he said, this game initially disappointed me. After playing Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill, I wanted to see what a horror game on a newer console looked like, which led me to Blue Stinger. After realizing it's not scary and brightly colored, I didn't like it. However, I soon grew to love the game, much like Army of Darkness or Return of the Living Dead. It was a goofy, over-the-top, horror-tinged experience. The game, taking place in Christmas time, was also a really nice touch. This is a game that you can never predict where it's going next. And, this is a Christmas game, so it's great because we haven't really been doing holiday-themed games this year. I was kind of disappointed, like, we didn't have time to do a House of the Dead game in October. And
it was kind of like something we'd done in the past, too.
Yeah, it was kind of a tradition, and then it's just, I think the pickers took over the show, as they should. But honestly, I think we should have put our foot down and said, guys, we're taking a week off to talk about the House of the Dead. I don't know where we're at now, I guess 4. So Scarlet Dawn, right? Or no,
4 is Scarlet. No, which one's 4? Scarlet Dawn's the non-numbered. I think 4 is just called House of the Dead 4.
Yeah. So, but this episode we're going to be talking about a Christmas game, which is great because this episode is going to be going out before Christmas, so you can gather your family around the fire and say, guys, we're going to spend an hour listening to two guys talk about Blue Stinger. And what is Blue Stinger? So it is a 1999 action-adventure game developed by Climax Graphics for the Dreamcast. It was published by Sega in Japan and by Activision in Western territories as a console launch title. The game released March 25th, 1999 in Japan, and on August 31st, 1999 in North America, with European releases in October the same year. It is one of the North American launch titles for the Dreamcast. And yeah, you heard that date correctly. I believe this was one of the ones you could get early at rental stores. Remember that? Like before the launch, you could play Sonic Adventure, and you could play Blue Stinger. So yeah, that the release dates on the Sega Retro Wiki are always, they always have interesting little tidbits, and that was one of them. Would you say this is a $99.99 launch title, or would you give it that like early rental release?
So I don't even know. I think all rental games, I would still consider them launching technically on $99.99. And this is definitely a game I remember when it came out, because there was actually people at my school that actually were fans of this game and talked about it. And I was the one, oddly enough, that talked down on the game, because just like Michael's talked about, I was more into like the gritty graphics of the horror games at the time. So I was more a little edgelord, to be honest with you. A little wrong. I guess this thing flew right over my head, what they're trying to accomplish with the game. So I became a hater. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about the game's graphics, Barry? Like the anime approach to this game?
Yeah. So I guess jumping right to what our memories are of
Right.
Blue Stinger, I remember seeing it in magazine ads. I don't think there was much in terms of like TV commercials. I don't even think it made the early launch commercials where you would like fly through the Dreamcast. Maybe the characters were like sprinkled in there in those like
Background shots?
almost like Roger Rabbit or Wreck-It Ralph, like just insane. Like I think that's where Wreck-It Ralph got their idea from.
You think
honestly,
so?
like yeah, because it physically goes inside a machine and all the characters from the games are just like hanging out between games. But yeah, I was not big into survival horror, and this game it's kind of survival horror. It's more of like a action adventure game. But I think the way they sold it really didn't make me want to pick it up, and looking at it now, it is like a very bright game. So yeah, there's very little atmosphere. And we'll get into that element of it, but I did want to ask, when did you pick this game up?
After the Dreamcast's life, it's this weird thing. Maybe I did own it before by trading and traded it out, but it wasn't
Yeah.
a game that I ever sought after too much and thought too much of. But
Yeah.
I do own it now. I forgot how I got it, but I most likely probably bought it on eBay, like most normal people, I want to say, because I think most normal people don't go to yard sales in hopes that they find a massive cachet of old games, you know. So
Yeah.
it saves you a lot of money and headaches sometimes just to pay the price of convenience. But yeah, this is one of those games. To me, it wasn't high on my list of Dreamcast games, but I feel like it's probably aged the most unique because I don't know too much about the company. I do know they made Illbleed, but I don't think they made too many games outside of a couple of games. So I
Right.
think they had a very unique and weird voice that maybe wasn't, I guess, the highest quality, but it definitely made you remember the games. Because I do remember Blue Stinger, even though it has cheesy anime graphics. But yeah, you?
Right. Yeah. Well, I this is probably one of my earlier like post Dreamcast pickups, like post Dreamcast era. I was probably collecting games again in the maybe like early 2010s, like when I kind of started building up my library again. And this was probably the ones I picked up at like a game convention or a retro game store. I probably got it for like 10, 20 bucks. And if those listening are wondering, the game now goes for like 40 bucks. So it's really has not leapt in price, which is kind of interesting because, like you mentioned, Illbleed, the same developers of this went on to make that. And that game is like $150, $200 game.
Yeah, it is.
And this one's 40 bucks. So if you're like, man, I wish I could get Illbleed, pick this one up because it's about it's the same team, and it's interesting. We'll get into the development and everything, but I will mention that, like, yeah, it I don't know, like Blue Stinger and Illbleed are kind of reminds me of like the Kenji Eno like games where it's just they're a little weird and offbeat and they have their own flavor. But I will say that both Blue Stinger and Illbleed are like and I'm not jumping the gun here on spoiling what I'll say later, but like, yeah, they're not the best games.
No.
And the studio never got a chance to really find their footing. Like, it's not like you would point to these and go like, well, this is what they were making, but then they made this game. Like, it never made it to that.
Right.
It was always just a few weird offbeat games, but you know, I like the art style. I like the look of it. And I like the story, and let's talk a little bit about that. So the story itself, it follows emergency rescuer Elliot Belade after he is stranded on the monster-infested Dinosaur Island, and he allies himself with fellow survivors and the alien being Nephilim to find the source of the monsters. And Nephilim like puts itself in the body of a Japanese anime like model kit figure. It's very weird. Like the guy driving the boat, it's like, I think it's like, he's like, oh, it's the Angels series, and this is like the whatever angel, and it's like an angel in a bottle, so you're building an anime girl in a bottle. What do you think of that?
That's interesting.
But it's weird, but it's like when you know that these people went on to make Illbleed, it makes perfect sense, because that's a weird game too.
Oh yeah, it's very weird.
And I think he had the developer had a weird sense of humor, because I mean, this is the guy that made Toy Story, like Evil Toy Story and Evil Sonic the Hedgehog in his games. And in this case, he's like, oh, what if an alien found like anime girl model kit and decided to take on the form of that?
That seems very on cue though, with Japanese sense of humor though.
Yeah, for sure. And the gameplay itself, it has Elliot navigating Dinosaur Island, fighting monsters using various weapons found or purchased during the game, and finding items to progress to other areas. So, key cards. You're going to be finding a lot of key cards in this game. The story's set during Christmas Eve 2018, which is interesting because it's like a not-so-distant future set game. And, you know, it's 2024 as we record this, so 2018 has passed. And I was just looking back at like what was happening in 2018, December 2018. I believe we got our first look at live-action Sonic, or at least teases of him, because we saw his hairy legs on that. Yeah. And then I was also looking at our like favorite games video that we did. This was back when it was like a news bits, before we did put it back on Swing and Report Show, which we actually need to do one in the next like 3 weeks or so. But yeah, around that time in December 2018, we had the Sonic Mania Adventures cartoons coming out. There was the Amy Rose one. We had the Shenmue
anime.
I don't know if the Shenmue remasters came out around that time, but there was the Yakuza 5, the final one, right? The fitting end, where they're like, oh, it's Kazuma's final game.
Yeah, Yakuza 6.
Right. So that's what we were doing. We were pretending to we were like doing the virtual toilet urinal game and watching Sonic Mania Adventures at the time that Blue Stinger was taking place. So yeah, that's kind of weird. And let me get more in depth with the story here, because it's, like I mentioned, there's some weird stuff going on. So the game kicks off with this, I don't know if it's well animated or not for the time. I don't know if you've rewatched the opening cutscene since. I'm playing it right now. It's rough. It's very rough, but at the same time, it's almost like in-game graphics. So when I was playing the game and I was looking at the cutscenes, I was like, this looks rough. This doesn't look great. And then when the game started, I was like, oh, these are the game graphics now. Okay, well, at least there isn't like a huge disconnect between the cutscenes and the in-game graphics, which I kind of dig. But at the same time, I'm like, why weren't these all in-game graphics then? That was a little off-putting.
Right.
But the game does start 65 million years ago. A meteorite strikes Earth, causing the extinction of the dinosaurs and setting the stage for human evolution. In the year 2000, a massive earthquake sinks the Yucatan Peninsula, leaving only one island above the meteorite's impact site. And can you guess the name of this island?
I mean, I could call it anything, but if I was a Japanese developer, I would call it Dinosaur Island.
Great name, yeah. And this is where the International Biotech Corporation, Kimra, establishes a research community. Now, fast forward, it's 2018. Elliot Belade, a member of the Emergency Sea Evacuation and Rescue, is vacationing near Dinosaur Island with his friend Tim when a small meteorite crashes nearby. The impact creates a barrier that traps Tim in stasis. A light emanates from the meteorite, forming a being called Nephilim, named after Tim's good luck boat charm, which is that anime girl in a bottle that he was building.
Yeah.
Monsters attack the boat, and Tim appears to be killed. Elliot manages to escape with Nephilim to Dinosaur Island, now overrun by monsters, mutated animals, and humans. As Elliot explores the island, Nephilim guides him, while Janine King, a surviving security team member, provides support via radio. Elliot also joins forces with Dogs Bauer, the island's original discoverer and Janine's estranged father. Elliot learns that Kimra discovered the meteorite was actually the egg of a dangerous alien called Dinocyte, whose DNA mutates other organisms. During an attack, Elliot accidentally ingests a mutant's vomit and begins to transform. Dogs prepares to end Elliot's life. Oh, these are spoilers, guys.
Oh yeah,
by the way,
say you're getting a little.
This is a 25-year-old game, so Dogs prepares to end Elliot's life if the mutation becomes permanent, but Elliot's cured in time. And I won't spoil the rest of the game there, but yeah, it's pretty weird. It's pretty wild. It's pretty interesting. Do you think, like, based on what I've read and what you've experienced in the game, does it feel like its own thing, or does it feel like kind of like a Capcom survival horror mashup game?
It kind of feels like a weird side, like, okay, so the graphics alone kind of like, if I marketed it, it would be like an action anime game, to be honest with you, more than a horror game because of the character designs and stuff. But it kind of, I mean, the aspects of getting card keys is literally Resident Evil. The idea of being stuck in an area where you have to escape and slowly open up doors to find an exit, and that's your only actual goal of the game, is very Resident Evil. So there's a lot of Resident Evil Capcom tropes that they use, but at the same time, graphically and the story, like, seems a little more silly. I would say it's more like Dino Crisis in a way. I mean, not just because of the Dinosaur Island, but because of it being an anime girl. You know, she has red hair in Dino Crisis. It looks more anime, and it's kind of more silly fighting dinosaurs than it is fighting zombies. More over the top. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's strange because it's kind of like Resident Evil meets Dino Crisis, but there aren't really dinosaurs in the game. It throws you off because they talk about Dinosaur Island, but really, you know, it might as well be like you make a survival horror game in like Pennsylvania, and you're like, oh, this is the birthplace of America. And you're like, all right, does that have anything to do with what's going on? No, but it's the birthplace of America. And you're like, oh, is there going to be like mutant presidents from pasts? And you're like, no. It's you know, like here they're like, Dinosaur Island, Dinosaur Island. You're like, where's the dinosaurs? And they're like, well, I mean, there's an egg, but it's mostly mutants, you know?
Right.
So I mean, I think it does enough to stand out and be its own, but it's very clearly inspired by those Capcom games, even if the development team didn't like flat out say it. The gameplay itself then, so it's an action adventure game. Players control either Elliot or Dogs on Dinosaur Island, which has been overrun by, as we mentioned, monsters. Players explore the 3D environments to advance the story by unlocking new areas of the island complex. The Japanese version featured fixed third-person camera angles similar to Resident Evil, while the Western version uses an over-the-shoulder third-person view and offers an optional first-person mode, which I actually didn't know about. So I gotta see what that's all about.
I didn't know.
I know you can.
Oh, I didn't know that there was a difference, that big of a difference between the Japanese and American release. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that. So, like, the fact that they went in there and, like, that's a pretty drastic alteration to the game. Like,
Yes.
it makes me wonder if Activision was afraid that it looked too much like Resident Evil, and they were like, we don't want reviews to say Resident Evil ripoff. Like, let's... But, so do you think it was that reasoning, or do you think it was because 3D, this is like a Dreamcast game, a launch title, and we're giving people fixed camera perspectives? It looks very flat. Like, do you think that was the reasoning, or
I think it was
what's your take?
I think there was, like, even though people played Resident Evil, everyone openly kind of mocked the idea of the fixed camera angles they used. And even growing up, I remember people making mocking the tank controls, and I think they try to get away from that and show you that this is a new evolution of that genre where it's more actiony and smoother, better, cleaner graphics for sure. Because, that's what I think. But what do you think?
I feel like it might have been a little bit of both. I think they looked at the game and they're like, man, this looks like Resident Evil. And also, this is a launch title. And, like, imagine if Sonic Adventure came out and the whole game was fixed camera angles. Like,
yeah.
You know, or the whole game was 2.5D side-scroller. You're like, man, where's the 3D graphics?
While we might like that now, back then people would have hated it. They would have been like, this is a ripoff.
But it also makes me wonder how the original plays compared to this, because that kind of, I wouldn't say it's game-breaking, but you have to imagine that there are certain areas where they did not want the player to look around and see everything. And so the fact that you just kind of unlock the camera and let players explore, it's almost like a little game-breaking in that sense, because, like, you've played games where they're like, oh, we hacked it, and now you can, like, rotate the camera around and see that the room isn't completely finished, or that there's, like, a big empty void. And to be honest, like, when I was playing, I jumped in and played a few hours of the game this week, and it seemed very empty in areas, and I have to imagine it was because the camera was meant to be in a certain place.
Oh, yeah.
But because I was freely exploring, it's like no one thought to put anything on either side of me. It was that intro where you're just, like, going straight the whole way, and it's so boring.
Yeah.
But other gameplay option, there are side missions available. It rewards players with new weapons and items. And if you die, or lose all your health, I should say, the game ends and you have to reload from the title screen, which kind of stinks. Like, you have to go through all that. Gameplay focuses on exploration and progression through different areas of Dinosaur Island by finding key cards, and that's mainly what you're finding. The game consists of 8 large environments, including outdoor areas like harbors and indoor locations like labs and a shopping mall. Some areas feature environmental hazards like extreme temperatures, represented by a status bar. Enemies are encountered throughout the island and can be defeated using weapons, which are either found or purchased from vending machines using money dropped by enemies. Larger foes and bosses have dedicated health bars. And what did you think about... There's 2 things I actually really liked about the game, and I wanted to hear your take. So if someone drops something, or there's an item to find, it's very clearly like a glowing spot on the floor. Do you appreciate that, instead of having to check everyone?
100% appreciate that. Actually, that was a thing that I told you I was playing the Indiana Jones games, and that's something you could change on there, because I couldn't see anything. Yeah. And yes, I like the glowing thing. Please make everything glowy. I hate when you, like, miss something in a game and I feel like I missed out, and I'm like, oh, now I have to backtrack to get that one coin that has that one inscription in the back for no reason to put in my inventory. So yes, please make everything glow, please.
Because there are, like, especially at the intro, you're running and you see all these bodies all over the place. You don't need to check every body. Like,
Yeah.
only, like, one of them in an area has a little, like, blinking light, and you go over and you pick something up. Also, when you kill enemies, it's like Fantasy Zone. They just drop coins.
Yeah.
Like, coins fly out of their body.
Like Sonic,
and it's
like Sonic, just...
like Sonic losing his rings, and you pick them up, and it's just so satisfying to run around and pick up like little pennies. like these guys, especially the first enemy you fight, it's like dead on the floor. You go over and pick up something from it, like a can of soda or something that gives you energy, and then it just immediately stands up and starts fighting you, and you kill it, and then it falls back down, and pennies fly out of it. It's wonderful.
I wish if there ever is a mutant uprising and our cities are taken over, that we could just kill them and money flies out.
I mean, when it comes to games like this, I'm a simple man. Like, if they're gonna include something as ridiculous as money flying out of them, I love it. So that's one bright spot for me. Another gameplay element is that players can switch between Elliot and dogs once they're together. Each character has unique abilities. Elliot is faster and can use multiple weapons, and can swim underwater for a limited time. And in contrast, Dogs is slower, can only use one weapon at a time, and can defend himself and fight enemies using his fists. What did you think of this mechanic? Do you think it needed some work? Because I definitely think it did.
Yeah, definitely needed work. But I will say that it's still a Resident Evil trope in the way, playing two characters, because in the first game you played Jill and was it Chris or was it the old guy? I forgot who you played. And then the sequel you played as Leon and Claire. And in the second one they made it 2 discs. So they've done this before, but I feel like they try to do something even more like, these guys are totally different. One's a boy and one's an old man that's heavy set, and the boy is basically a twink, I guess. But so yeah, that's basically what they did with these two characters, I guess. And just to make them as different as possible, they even made this guy Mexican, it looks like, a little bit. Or more indigenous, considering not white, I would say. I don't know. I think it's an interesting take, but like you said, it needed work, and it's hard to balance that because sometimes limiting a character will make it more annoying to play as that character because of the limits.
Right. I as far as the pairing, it's a weird pairing. Like this, like, young white guy who's got like, he's like Ryo Hazuki. He's got the cut, but he didn't put the Band-Aid on it. And then he's got this old guy who's the father of the female in the game that's non-playable. And it's like, why didn't they pick the young guy and the young girl? I don't know why.
Because people want to play as dogs. Right when they saw them, everyone's like, "Can we play as dogs already?"
Well, why? It is a weird pairing because at least in the first few hours I played, which I guess is like a quarter of the game. It's not that long of a game. I just didn't really get much camaraderie, or like I didn't get much in terms of them as a duo. They didn't really work well together. And honestly, Dogs was just like so slow. Elliot's slow, but Dogs is slower. So when you have a slow character and you're like, ooh, let's switch to the slower one. Like, no thanks. Also, switching to them, you had to do it from the menu. There wasn't like a fast, switch button. And the other character was not there. Like, it's not as though there's an NPC following you around of the other player and you just jump over to them. Like, games that do that well, I would say, are like the Simpsons game does that. I think Jackson Daxter did that.
I think so. I'm not sure. I haven't played it in a long time.
People are going to get mad. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, I think, did a really good job at that. Like, all the characters were on screen and you could jump around between them. That's pretty cool, but here they couldn't pull it off. I don't think they were able to get two characters on the screen at the same time, which is a shame.
They could have done the Resident Evil thing where they were separated and they just played differently and you could pick who you play as in the beginning. But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't know. I honestly would have preferred Elliot and the female character, because then, Elliot could have been considered the quote-unquote slow one, who already is slow, and then the female character could have been the faster one with like more limited health, but like faster attacks or something. That's usually how it works out.
Yeah.
The concept for the game, so let's talk a little bit about development. It was created by Shinya Nishigaki, a developer who previously worked at Enix and Climax Entertainment. Nishigaki drew inspiration from the films of Steven Spielberg, Akira Kurosawa, John Carpenter, and Joe Dante, with The Thing being a specific influence. He considered Blue Stinger... This game is not The Thing? No, it's something, but it's not The Thing. He considered Blue Stinger a tribute to Western action films. To develop the game, Nishigaki and members of Climax Entertainment's CGI division, who had worked on Dark Savior in 1996. Have you ever played that or heard of it?
I played a little bit of it, not too much, but it's from what I remember, it wasn't the greatest, but it's a cool experimental game. But yeah.
Yeah, so that team formed Climax Graphics, an independent brother company. So isn't that interesting? So Climax Entertainment's CGI division, these are the people that made the cutscenes. They formed their own brother company to develop their own games. And honestly, that tracks, because both Illbleed and Blue Stinger are very like CGI cutscene heavy games for the era, when they really usually would have been doing a lot of like in-game cutscenes because the graphics are already like to that level. But it seems like they're like, well, we know how to make CGI cutscenes, so let's take the exact same assets from the game and make them animated videos, even though we could have had it play out in the game itself. Pre-production for the game began in September 1996, after Dark Savior was completed. Initially intended for the Sega Saturn, development shifted to the Dreamcast at Sega's request. The new design drew additional inspiration from Resident Evil, Enemy Zero, and Alone in the Dark. Full production started December 1997, and debugging lasted until late January to early March 1999. Before we get into the game influences, have you seen any of those movies? The Thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen any? I don't know where the Akira Kurosawa influence comes from.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Has he done horror movies? No.
I think he did. I mean, no, not that I know of. He's done. I can't even think of one horror movie he might have done. I'm looking at John Carpenter. Who's Joe Dante and what has he done? That's the only name that I don't recall.
He's done Gremlins.
Okay. All right. I think Gremlins kind of shows up here. like it's kind of like silly like that. Not as in your face silly like Gremlins, but I mean, they literally like they throw chain like a Fantasy Zone character, like you said. It's pretty silly, but outside of this, Steven Spielberg is always talked about, I've noticed, in the 90s, and also he drew inspiration by like every single popular horror game in the 90s, literally. Resident Evil, Enemy Zero, Alone in the Dark.
Right.
Did you know that did you know that Alone in the Dark recently had a game?
I did, yeah. Okay. Was it any good?
I don't know. I just surprised that no one talked about it more. Like, that's another franchise that I think fell off in a way. Like, I guess it's still getting you things, but it's weird that it had a new game and no one talked about it. But
we're talking about it.
Have you seen The Thing?
Yeah, I've seen The Thing. I haven't seen the original one. I've only seen like clips of it, but I've seen The Thing.
Okay.
And I can see the inspiration here for sure. What do you think about Blue Stinger being a Saturn release? Do you think it would have been remembered more fondly as like a late Saturn release, or?
I mean, probably. No. I wouldn't say no, just because. And this might be a hot take, even though I really, 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 really love the Saturn. I think there's something really special about it, especially the Japanese stuff. Is that the Dreamcast is going to be more fondly remembered in America than the Saturn will be ever, sadly, and that's because during its heyday, it was actually popular here in America, the Dreamcast. So I think if they wanted to capture an American audience, the Dreamcast was the best move, in my opinion, because it kind of did feel like a Sega Genesis type of reboot in its presence in America. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it maybe being a cult classic, but would it have even gotten a American release? Probably not, because this would have been like
the late
98,
yeah.
Maybe. So I think Sega was smart to delay it. So the development team, there were 18 members at Climax Graphics in Japan and 10 working from North America on early design and localization. And you might remember in the opening cutscenes, like, they, for whatever reason, credit like 2 American guys, and that's it. Like, they're not like directed by, and they give all these Japanese names. I don't know, it's a little weird how they like single out a couple American workers in the intro, but
you think it's like American privilege where they're like, ooh, look how professional Hollywood it sounds now?
Probably, because I remember it said like Activision presents, and then it gave like two white guy names.
Got it.
So yeah, they definitely like whitewashed the opening credits. After this I gotta jump on YouTube and watch like a playthrough of the Japanese one, because I bet none of that was there. So they had 10 Americans, or 10 people, I don't know if they were all American, working from North America on early design and localization. Nishigaki served as the producer and co-writer. Other key staff included Ayumu Kojima as director, Kazuaki Yokozawa as lead programmer, Ryosuke Murakami as art director, and Masaki Sagawa as character designer and co-writer. Atsuki Yamamoto was the game designer. Through his American connections, Nishigaki brought in Robert Short for creature designs and 3D models, and Pete Von Scholey as camera supervisor and storyboard artist. And those are the 2 white guys, at least I think they're white, credited at the top of the game.
I will say, though, creature designs is a big deal in my opinion. So but to be the forefront, I've never seen a horror movie where they're like, did you know we have Robert Short? But then I'm looking at his profile now, and he made the suit for The Flash, the 90s one.
Yeah.
Phantasm, I think. I think he also worked on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the newer one, or the old one. Probably the old one.
Yeah, so I mean, he definitely... this was probably Nishigaki, like showing, like, look who I got to work on this. But it still is a little odd to me how they didn't, like, highlight all these Japanese players, or Japanese developers, and decided to, like, highlight these 2 guys. The Japanese team worked nearly around the clock during the 2-year development, taking off only a few days. So this was definitely crunch time at its worst. The game was classified as a cinematic action-adventure game. Nishigaki aimed to break away from the traditional game genres. He incorporated themes of wit and humor to distinguish the game from the horror titles popular in Japan at the time. The environments were designed to avoid repetitive elements and to feel realistic and lived in, which, from what I experienced, means like things were like kicked over, like barrels were knocked over.
Okay.
The camera design was inspired by Nishigaki's love of film, which of course we know was changed for the American one, so we definitely did not get filmic shots. Character movements were animated using motion capture, which surprised me because the game does not feel motion capture-y.
It feels stiff.
It feels very stiff, yeah. Due to technical limitations, the game engine couldn't support 2-player characters on screen, preventing dogs from being an AI-driven companion and limiting Janine to non-playable role. Which, yeah, like if you see the art assets, like clearly they worked a lot on Janine for her to be a non-playable character, which kind of stinks. What do you think this game, like, imagine if this game had a 2-player either split screen or co-op, like, shared screen mode. Do you think that would have helped it?
Probably not.
Nah.
I think it was probably going to be one of those games that would have needed to be delayed. Probably because, I mean, I think a lot of the bulk of its sales came from the fact that it was a launch title, and it was the only, I guess, horror in a way game. I mean, House of the Dead 2, but that's a light gun game. If you wanted to play like a more adventure type of game where you actually had like, over an hour of gameplay, then this is probably the only game that was out at the time. That would give you a lengthy experience that wasn't Sonic and was sold out everywhere on launch date.
Right, yeah, that's a great point because, like, let's remind people listening that the Dreamcast launch had 18 games. It was actually a very strong, solid launch.
It was.
It had every genre really represented. We're not going to run through all of them, but, like, you know, there were games like Arrow Wings, Air Force Delta. You had Racers. So those were, like, the flying games. You had Racers, like Hydro Thunder and Flag to Flag, which are very different. Monaco Grand Prix. You had Fighters, Mortal Kombat Gold, Power Stone. You had sports games, NFL 2K, NFL Blitz. You had fighting games, Soul Calibur. You had light gun games, House of the Dead 2. You had, like, kind of offbeat racing games like Trick Style and Pen Tri Icelon. Honestly, too many racing games.
Too many, yeah.
In my opinion. But still, like, a great selection of fighters. And then, out of all those, you have Sonic Adventure and you have Blue Stinger. And those are really the only, like, narrative-driven games, like adventure exploration games, where you could physically move a character around in a 3D space that was not a racetrack or a small fighting game arena. So, in that regard, Blue Stinger, like, to sit alongside Sonic Adventure is pretty big.
Yeah.
And I don't think the game stacks up to Sonic Adventure standards. Like, I don't think it's replayable like Sonic Adventure is. But still, that's like a pretty good shelf to sit on at the time.
And I would say a lot of its sales came that way, and I think it would have bombed if they, like, delayed it and worked out all. I'm sure they could have worked it out, and made it a bigger game. But then now you're
right.
Now you have other games behind you, like Resident Evil Code Veronica. Are people going to buy your game or Code Veronica? That's going to be hard to be competing against.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that game came out, I don't think, too long after, because it was a white stripe label one, yeah. Which means, yeah, early. Talking a little more about development. So Sagawa primarily handled the plot, while Nishigaki focused on character dialogue. Elliot was designed as a fun-loving and flirtatious protagonist, contrasting with Dog's stoic demeanor. Janine played a central role in the character drama, with Nephilim intended to contrast with the grounded nature of the other characters. The game featured full 3D environments, character models, and numerous CGI cutscenes. Nishigaki believed SEGA supported the project because of its 3D focus. Lighting effects were handled by Nephilim's glow, weapon bursts, and preset light maps. To manage the number of creatures on screen, the game ran at 30 frames per second instead of 60 frames. The team did not utilize features like bump mapping, and Nishigaki noted they only used half of the Dreamcast's graphical capability due to incomplete knowledge of the console's specs. So, how would you say Blue Stinger compared visually to other Dreamcast launch titles?
It looks a little empty, obviously. Launch title wise, smooth. I don't know. It just felt like clunky. It looks fine in screenshots. Like if you showed me a screenshot, I'd be like, I have to check this game out. It looks pretty good. But once you see it running, you really see how barren the places are. How little characters there are on screen, and then you play something like Power Stone and the amount of action and how smooth it is. It really does. It is really kind of hard to be like, yeah, they're right up there with Capcom and Sega with adventure. But I would say this is as close as it gets in Japan at this time as an indie game. And if we're talking about this compared to, I don't know, D2, I think it's probably the closest comparison you can make, where they have flaws, but in the end of the day, they put a game together that's unique enough to come out. But I would say, I would say it's like better than Flag to Flag graphically. But how do you rank it? I would say it's middling.
This is for you, honey.
Yeah, it's interesting because by September 9th, 99, the Dreamcast was new to Americans, but it was not new to the world. It was like 10 months old. And there were a lot of people importing it. There were a lot of people figuring out how to mod chip it because they're like, I'm not waiting 10 months. honestly, I don't know why it took them so long to release the Dreamcast in the West. Like, that's a huge gap. And I don't think we've seen that since with consoles, where they're like, yeah, PlayStation 2's out, you're getting it, or PlayStation 5's out, you're getting it in a year. But, so having said that, like, there are Dreamcast launch games that, you know, to us as kids in, like, 1999, they were new to us, but now looking back, we're like, oh, this game's like a first gen, like 1998, late 1998 game that I didn't play until a year later. And it, to Sonic Adventure's credit, like, that game came out like much earlier than, like, it's a 1998 game, but it feels like fresh and like fast, and you know, it's not perfect.
No, but when you play that beach stage, what's it called? What is it called? What's
Emerald?
that?
Is it Emerald Coast?
Yeah, Emerald Coast. Yeah, in the demo, like, bro, when you saw those like footprints on the beach and the way the ocean looked, come on,
right?
Man. That sold you.
And those early Dreamcast games, there was something about them that made them look different from the later ones, and I think the big thing is a lot of them had 30 frames per second. A lot of them had like kind of blurry textures because people didn't. I don't think they understood just how sharp you could make them. Mm-hmm. And they also lacked like nice little touches like that. I think games like Soul Calibur and Sonic Adventure, they started to put those cool little touches in, like footsteps and like rain and things like that. But yeah, as far as Blue Stinger, I think graphically it's, you know, it's better than Flag to Flag, but it's kind of in line with a lot of the launch titles, like House of the Dead 2 and...
How about Pin Triathlon? How about that? Is it better than that, or is it that level?
Nothing's better than that. That one and Trick Style are just weird games.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely looks like a game born out of like the Saturn era. Like the cutscenes straight up look like the Shenmue Saturn cutscenes that they released years later.
Yeah.
There's something, I don't know, there's something special about it, but something very dated even at the time. The soundtrack to the game was composed by Toshihiko Sahashi, who was tasked with creating a Hollywood-style score. The opening and ending themes were performed by a 60-piece orchestra.
Wow.
Conducted by Koji Haishima, with the score inspired by the music of John Williams. It was Sahashi's first video game project, and he treated it like a film score, taking as much time as needed. Only the opening and ending themes used CD-quality audio. The rest relied on the Dreamcast sound chip.
So it sounded even better than CD-quality audio.
Exactly. So let's give a little listen to the soundtrack.
Which song you want? They have Landing, Cooperation.
Let's start with Landing for just like maybe 20 seconds or something, or 30.
Very moody music.
They can hear that orchestra, right?
Right.
Sounds good.
It doesn't.
Now let's skip ahead to Merry Christmas.
Is this going to be the ending song for this episode? I'm playing it. I think.
Isn't that great?
Wow. This is a good rendition. Nothing screams horror like this song.
Right. Interesting. And then I guess let's jump ahead to, I guess, the ending. Let's listen to Epilogue. That is so John Williams. That sounds like the end of E.T.
Yeah, you could tell that he definitely was influenced.
So,
if you guys need a John Williams copycat, guys,
so that's just a little taste of the soundtrack. And I don't know. Did you put up the artwork, or did
we haven't actually? That? We forego that. There is some artwork here. You want to look through
Let's look through it. Yeah. So
yeah, go for it.
What I don't know what order are we.
I have them in the order that you put them in the video thing.
So dogs is first.
So there's a picture of dogs with his back. So first it's a picture of the satellite being hit with the lightning strike, which is a poster artwork, which I have in the background of my video as my background.
That is very like filmic. It looks like a film poster from like the 70s for like, doesn't it?
Like alien life has landed on Earth, first contact or something like that. Some like alien body takeover movie.
Yeah, it looks cool. It looks epic. What do we have next?
Dog. He's turning his back on us like Kazuma Kiryu, and he's looking into some sort of sunset or nice vista. He has his boy dad shorts, yellow shirt that says wind, and his Nike Dunks on.
Nice.
And then we have him in the
next
front.
up. Okay, yeah. So we're looking at him from the front. Look at his hairy legs.
It's cute. And his shoes are
I love his
screwy.
shirt that says wind.
Which is, in the back it says wind too, and it has a little like hammerhead shark silhouette.
It's pretty cool.
Very cool. I want that shirt. Okay.
Next we have Elliot.
Right. Since 2001.
It's ESER Especial Sea Rescue since 2001.
Right. And he has
pretty
cool denim shorts that fit very, like, I don't know, it kind of looks like a weird, like, early prototype for Sid from Toy Story or something.
And his shoes look a little bit like Kingdom Hearts kind of shoes, like a little overly designed.
Yeah.
Next up we have Janine from the back.
Yeah, and her legs is busted, so she's playing the damsel in distress role.
Yeah, you'll also notice her like her butt
butt's weird.
is going into her leg because and you'll see this a lot in the cutscenes. Like their arms will just kind of like go inside their bodies,
they
like
clip, they call it
for a team that's like their core job was to make CG cutscenes. Honestly, they're not the best.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of clipping, and I'm not a snob about this stuff, but man, like her whole arm is going inside of her body.
I mean, her butt cheeks are going into her leg in just a picture here. Like her butt's clipping.
It's weird. Yeah. And then from the front, it is what it is.
It looks pretty normal.
She kind of looks like a Phantasy Star Online character.
I was going to say, like, the colors they use for everyone is very just, like, yellow and blue, right, for dogs, and is very bright blue for Elliot. And then we have her in orange. It's just very Sonic human-like character. Like, no one dresses like this in real life. I mean,
she looks like a Hunawhirl from Phantasy Star Online. Next, we have Nephilim from the back.
Yeah, it was butt crack,
and
basically.
then from the front, and her model looks pretty good, actually. I think her toes look a little weird from the front. You see that?
Yeah, it's clipping. I'm joking. No,
yeah, no, they're like physically like sticking out. It's very weird.
They like added them after the fact, the 3D objects one by one, the toes. But yeah. Oh, this is artwork.
I love the artwork. I think the art style is really cool, and it's the same artist who did Illbleed. It looks like
mugshots.
The art style almost looks like a Western take on like Japanese anime. It I don't know. There's something about it that I really like. It kind of reminds me of like high schooler sketchbook, like that one guy who's like really good at drawing anime in your class. And you're like, oh, cool. Look at that.
Yeah.
The close-up of dogs too. He looks really nice. Elliot here. I mean, you can see, like, honestly, I think the 2D art is really good, and I don't think the translation to CG was all that hot.
He's redheaded?
Yeah, he's redheaded here. He's got his little cut. He looks a little grumpy.
And then we got, what's her name? The alien being that's an anime waifu?
Oh, are you talking about Janine or the blue lady?
The blue lady. She's pretty mean right here. She doesn't look that mean in the game.
No, she's a little more friendly.
And then we got
and then Janine. Yeah, Janine's art looks.
She looks like she's blushing. Like,
I think she is. She's happy to see you. She thinks you look like her dad.
Ugh. Okay, let's skip it. The gun, CGI gun. What is this?
It's just like an object. I don't know. It's these were all in, I guess, a press kit because they're all on Sega Retro.
I'm looking through them. It's just a lot of guns that you get in the game, and then it's artworks of dog with a gun. Oh, each character with a gun.
They just really like the little environmental shots of guns. They like sent them out probably in press kits.
And then there's the poster that's a CGI kind of cover type poster with the galaxy and a dog and Elliot.
Yeah, what do you think about that one compared to the cover we got?
Put it up for people. That one seems more horror-like, the one that you were holding up, but the one that we're looking at here seems like a space movie.
It does, yeah. It's interesting. And also the logo for the game is different on the cover than it is in like the game itself. Yeah, because the Japanese cover shows the title screen logo you see, but for whatever reason they redesigned the logo for the West and yet decided to like not change it on the title screen. Yeah. Going into the voice acting, it was recorded in English for all regions, with subtitles used in the Japanese release to emulate Hollywood films. So, I will say, if you want to import this game, it's probably very playable because of that.
It's like Deep Fear, then.
Yeah, so I might import this, because I'm really interested to see like the fixed camera angle. The lead roles were voiced by Ryan Drummond and Dean Bristow, with Lonnie Minella directing the recordings and voicing Janine. All three actors were working on Sonic the Hedgehog games at the time. Nishiaki praised Drummond's performance as Elliot, and I actually have...
Did you get him to sign your game?
I have his autograph. I didn't get him to sign this because I wasn't thinking, but yeah, I've got his autograph back there, so that's kind of cool.
If I go to a Sonic event and he's there, I'm going to be like, hey, I know your most famous role, and I'm going to wham, pow, put it right there. Elliot.
Yeah.
Who's
and
not
then Roger Craig Smith voiced the cameo of the Skies of Arcadia star in...
Vice.
Yeah, he voiced Vice in the Valkyria Chronicles cameo. So you've got like a little history of these like Sonic voice actors also voicing generic white guys.
I'll have him sign my limited run copy of Valkyria Chronicles that I've already bought 15 times at this point. God dang, how many times do we have to re-release that game? But yeah.
So what do you think about that? Do you think that kind of gives this... It's interesting because like we were saying, this game sits alongside Sonic Adventure. And it has the same voice cast.
Not only that, Elliot, like I said in the beginning, they're like kind of Sonic colors, and he's blue, hero blue, like, you know, the stereotype. So he's playing, I'm assuming, just... He doesn't play him like Sonic. That'd be ridiculous. Can you imagine him playing the character Elliot like Sonic?
Whoa!
Yeah,
right?
There's
mutants,
whoa! In Dinosaur Island?
To their credit as voice actors, like, I did not hear Ryan and Dean Bristow when I was playing.
Neither did I.
But it's cool. Like I really like that. How it's like it almost feels a little like Dreamcast was like an indie studio where like we only have a few voice actors and they're going to do all of our games.
I know Ryan gets a lot of shit on the internet for his voice work. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes there's a lot of big fans that worship him. But what do you think about his performance as Elliot, since it was praised by the director of the game?
I thought it was all right. I think the script is really weak.
Yeah.
The way the characters talk, and it's kind of the same with Shenmue. Like it's these like Japanese directors writing the script, and it does not read correctly, but they go along with it anyway. And I remember when I interviewed the voice cast for Shenmue and Shenmue 2, they were like, I asked them, like, did you ever look at the script and you were just like, this reads funny. Can we, like, change it? And they were like, yeah, we would sometimes be like, no one says it this way. Can we change the way they say it? And they'd be like, no, just stick to the script, you know?
That's crazy. Like, somebody in America read the script for some of the Shenmue lines and were like, no, this is how Americans talk. This is normal. Or
And they also did things where they would be like, they'd bring someone in to voice like a teenager, and then they're like, oh, you're also voicing an old man.
no.
And that's why it would be like, oh, okay, I don't do an old man voice. And I'm like, well, just try one because we're going to use it.
I would say that this game does feel, though, like if we're going to be saying anything about it positively, I think it does feel like they try to put as much quality as they could. Like you said, they got actual voice actors. They tried to make it feel like a Hollywood score, like we listened to just not that long ago. And
Right.
they also, I mean, I thought that the graphics for the time period, I mean, when we're talking about PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, it looked like a decent step up, especially with the camera not being fixed. So I think they did a lot of good things. But voice acting, though, like, I don't know, it's one of those hard things where for its time, it was probably the best voice acting ever. I think the only games that got voice acting right during this period were Metal Gear Solid. I can't think of that many other games.
Right, and I mean, I think, I don't know if we're being too harsh on this game. I do think they did put like their best effort into a lot of areas, and it didn't always show, but you know, it's clear that this wasn't like a rush job. It's clear that this wasn't like a game that they were like, let's make a cheap Resident Evil clone so we can get this out to market and make some money. Like, they worked for 2 years on this, and it does feel very much like an indie game in that regard. Like, it feels like a game from a team that we're not like, you know, they're kind of like learning on the job, and the result is a game that's not perfect by any means. It's not great, but it's not bad. There's some cool stuff, and yeah, the score is great. I think the fact that they put effort into the voice acting, even though the script wasn't quite there, is something. And this game itself, it was announced at Tokyo Game Show in September 1998 as part of the Dreamcast launch lineup, originally set for November that year. However, the game was delayed to allow for additional polishing. Sega was disappointed it missed the Japanese launch, but they understood the delay. The game was eventually released in Japan on March 25th, 1999, and published by Sega. On March 20th, a soundtrack album and single featuring the promotional song Sting Me were released through Columbia's music label.
Wow.
A strategy guide, which included gameplay tips and a developer interview, was published by SoftBank Creative on April 27th. So this game did get like the full rollout, and Sting Me, I've never heard it, but I like the name.
In Japan.
I don't know what Blue Stinger means. I'm just thinking about that.
I have no
Is
idea.
that like the... Is that like a comet? You know, like a blue planet, like the water, and then Stinger's the meteorite coming to hit Earth?
Maybe the trail it leaves behind? I don't know. I will say, though, that I think at this time period, Sega thought that maybe they had another D in their hands, because, like, D did sell 1 million copies, and I think Sega and these companies that published this put all this effort in Japan in hopes that this would be an underground horror game in line with D, but I guess it didn't work out. But
it didn't quite meet D's standards.
No.
So yeah, Blue Stinger, it almost joined Virtua Fighter 3 TB and Pen Trilelon. I've never said the word right.
Triathlon, or was it Tricillion?
Trilelon.
Oh, okay.
Tricillion.
Tricillion, there you go.
Trilelon.
Yeah.
So it almost joined those two games as games that both launched the Dreamcast in Japan and America, but it missed that date. Do you think the extra time shows? I mean, we don't know for sure, but it seems like this game definitely released kind of feeling unfinished already.
Right,
so
I could just imagine how bad it would have been.
Yeah, I mean, what they got an additional 4 months, and I think they said like debugging concluded like in March, so they probably like finished, and then they were like, all right, print it.
And they still had time to add more camera systems.
It makes me wonder, like, yeah, how much work did Activision do? They were like, oh, just have it float behind them during the cutscenes. I don't know. At E3, 1999, Blue Stinger was showcased with Activision, confirmed as the publisher for territories outside Japan. The partnership emerged when Sega approached Activision about supporting the Dreamcast, and Activision showed interest in the game. For the Western release, as we mentioned, the camera system was changed at Activision's request, a decision that Nishigaki disliked and mockingly referred to as the Gyro system. I don't know what that means. Maybe, I don't know why he called it that. The Western version also included a harder difficulty mode, rewarding players with costume changes upon completion. So that's kind of neat. Some elements were modified for Western audiences to avoid confusion or offense. I wonder what those were. I never knew.
Probably us eating hamburgers all the time or something cool like
maybe.
that. Something really awesome and amazing.
Do you think he should have, like, Nishigaki should have, like, stuck up for the game and maybe said, like, hey, we do the fixed camera perspective, or we don't, like, do you think he had any control?
I think being stubborn with the camera is probably not a great thing in hindsight, but I don't think it would have killed the game in America because we were used to those type of games. But yeah, maybe have a couple of backbones, especially if you're going to be calling it the Gyro system. Like, what did we do to you?
Well, why? What I don't get is why wasn't it a mode that you could still select? Like, call it, like, movie mode.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't understand why they completely got rid of it. That seems a little shitty on their on Activision's
if
part.
I was them, I would have told them, hey, how about you fix the movement, put a run button so we could get to places faster, because it's ridiculous.
I think 100%. I think a run button, because when I was playing, I was like looking for it. I was like, oh man, there isn't one. Blue Stinger, it launched in North America on September 9th, 99, and in Europe on October 14th, 99, serving as a launch title for the Dreamcast in both regions. Brady Games had an English language strategy guide released. I gotta check that out.
Do you collect them?
I like to pick them up from time to time, especially for games like this. Like Shenmue, I have the one.
Some of them are getting expensive all of a sudden.
They are, that's true. A sequel was proposed by Sega, but Nishigaki shifted focus to developing the survival horror game Illbleed. Plans to port enhanced versions of Blue Stinger and Illbleed to the Xbox were canceled after Nishigaki's death in 2004. Partly due to the Xbox's poor sales in Japan. So, yeah, it kind of fizzled out. And if you remember, too, Illbleed, he created a different team, and they actually published it outside of, or actually in Chicago, like downtown Chicago on the north side. And I searched up the address, and yeah, it's like kind of near the water, like a little business complex with a couple floors.
Nice.
And it's just wild to me that, like, you could go there and be like, son, that's where Illbleed came out in the West. And I wonder how that worked. Like, I wonder if it was just like to have like an office. They were just like, we need an address. Let's rent something and have one guy there. Like, I really don't know what was going on.
They don't do that in Chicago, where you could just rent a fake building where they tell people that you're there and you work out of there just for whatever purpose.
Well, famously, Al's Italian Beef, like, they claim to have invented Italian beef. They were a front for the mob. So it's like you get a sandwich, but it's actually a front for the mob. So yeah, in this case, it was like, I don't know if it was a front, but it definitely something shady was going on there. But what legacy do you think Nishigaki left on the Dreamcast in the survival horror genre? Because let me remind you, we've covered Illbleed, so we've covered his entire run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to say. I think he contributed to a era of indie or smaller team Japanese developers. They got together to make unique games, and so mostly in their terms, I feel like Nishigaki here had to conform some of his ideas to Activision. But regardless, he had the choice to go from Blue Stinger to Illbleed. Nobody forced him to do Blue Stinger 2. So there was freedom there, and I think that's his legacy, is that he contributed to a movement in Japan at the time of horror games that were unique. You?
I'd agree with you. Yeah, he definitely wasn't as influential as Kenji Eno, but I think he made his mark, even if it's more of a footnote. That's more than most of us have done.
Oh yeah.
I will say I think Illbleed was a great follow-up because that's the one that I think really turned some heads and did something different for the genre. But Blue Stinger, I will say what I appreciate about it is if you're squeamish about survival horror games, this game is not going to scare you. This game's not going to make you feel on edge, which honestly, I am not a big survival horror fan, so I kind of like these earlier games because their clunkiness takes away from the fear factor for me. I can't play the new ones. It's just too much for me. But yeah, so, it not the best games, but not the worst. And, we've said in the past that, like, games like this sometimes are more memorable than the ones that are either complete garbage or are AAA perfect. Because, I mean, people just kind of will, like, offhanded be like, oh yeah, Resident Evil Code Veronica, great game. But then I think with a game like Blue Stinger, people will discuss it a lot more when they're talking about it, because there's just so much more to be said, even if some of it's negative. Like, I don't hear people going on and on about Code Veronica. They just go, yeah, the game's great because it plays well.
Right.
And talking about that strategy guide, I looked it up. It's not that expensive. I'm finding ones that have little rips and tears for $30. I'm finding ones that are like mint for $50, but it seems like $30 is the going price for it. So yeah, I might check around. I'm actually a big fan of Thrift Books. I don't know if you've ever used that website.
I have. I used to buy. I used to buy books there that would like textbooks that I needed. I would get them from there.
Yeah, so that's a good resource. I during the pandemic, I think I bought like every Sega Genesis, Dreamcast, Saturn like strategy guide, like those general code books, because they were so cheap. They were like $1 each, and I'm like, oh, I'll just drop $30 and get like 20 of these, and they all arrived at a huge stack of them, and they were so cool. But yeah, before we close things out, we're going to take a look at some commercials, and then we're going to talk about how the game actually did sales-wise, because that's worth talking about. So this first one, it's a Japanese commercial. I just am calling it Japan. So let's take a look at that one. It's
Emergency.
16 seconds.
Mayday, mayday.
人類最悪の戦いが
That's not good. Don't give up so easily.
ついに始まるノンストップアドベンチャーブルースティンガー
Here we go!
Blue Stinger.
What do you think of that one? It packs a lot in for 15 seconds.
It's a whirlwind adventure spliced in. It's like, I don't know. They could make this a good YouTube reel. Or short. I mean, it's a good commercial. I'm actually happy that they showed a lot of gameplay and CGI stuff, because like we've seen in some of the past games, sometimes it's just actors. This has no actors. It's just straight into the game. That's it. So at least it's the forefront.
Right. And you get to see dogs dressed as Santa, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Always good.
This next one has a little more going for it, so let's check that out.
I'll press play.
デザートつけてきて私のことずっと見てんのいる気持ち悪いやつ最近多いよねそうテカテカしちゃって気をつけないと何されるか分かんないよもうマジぶっ飛ばしたいって感じ本当だよ
とどめを刺せノンストップアドベンチャーブルースティンガー
でもさそういうのに限ってしつこいんだよねだよね
That one's interesting. I also notice a trend in Japan is that they have real life representations of the characters within their commercials. And in America,
you can see dogs.
Yeah. We don't do that in America. I'm saying, like, you don't like watch a commercial and then all of a sudden it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think like a real life. I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog, I guess, is different. I'm trying to think of like a game that is serious, like Call of Duty. There's not soldiers in Call of Duty like making a commercial like this. There's a war going on outside.
Cool. It's cool to see like Elliot and dogs in live action, even if it's like a weird commercial like that. This last one, it's not so much a commercial. I think this is something you'd probably find on a demo disc if they didn't put a playable demo. But this is all I could find for like an American commercial.
25 seconds. I'll press play. Activision explosion logo. music.
Yeah, drum and bass.
Yeah. It's exciting, guys, right? This is like the
Now,
last...
what's interesting is that I believe this is from the Japanese version, so you get the fixed camera perspectives in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is, like, the music is the last thing I think about. This is, this music's supposed to be exciting, action-pounding, drum and bass. The last thing I think about with Blue Stinger is not a fast-paced action game. It's pretty slow. So it's weird that they do these really quick cuts to make it more action.
I suspect this is something you would see like on loop at like a kiosk at like E3 or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is what it is. But it is interesting to see those fixed cameras. So how did the game sell? Well, Blue Stinger sold over 61,000 copies during its first week in Japan, achieving a sell-through rate of just under 56%. It eventually sold over 111,000 copies in total, making it the 34th best-selling Dreamcast title in the region. That's not that bad.
I don't think so either.
Despite modest sales in Japan, the game performed well in North America. During the Dreamcast launch week in the UK, Blue Stinger ranked as the 8th best-selling game out of the 12 launch titles. In total, the game sold 500,000 copies worldwide, which Sega considered a commercial success. And I think that also explains why the game's so affordable right now, because so many copies are out there, which is not bad. I appreciate that. I'd much prefer that to like Panzer Dragoon Saga. That's like impossible to find. The game received above average reviews. It averaged around 70%, making it one of those games we always talk about as being the best, because we know the best games are 7 out of 10. So we're going to close things out now with our final thoughts on Blue Stinger itself. George, why don't you go first?
It might not be the best survival horror game. It might not be the most anime game. It might not even have the best waifu of all time. But Blue Stinger does right as a soundtrack, taking a unique take on a horror game. And I don't think you'll play a horror game that looks like this ever in modern times. Like, we're not going to have anime boys in a guy named Dog with that looks like a Mexican Cheech in your next horror game. Sorry, ain't happening. This is a pretty unique title. So that's what I have to say about Blue Stinger. You?
I think the Sega Dreamcast, one thing it very much lacks are action-adventure games. And I think Blue Stinger definitely helps fill that void, even if it's not a perfect game. I also think that if you are a fan of Illbleed, which is a much weirder and I consider better game than this one, you're going to want to pick this one up and play it, because it is unique. It definitely gives you a look at what the Dreamcast launch was like. And at the time, like, yeah, if I was starved for something beyond Sonic Adventure in September of 1999, I would definitely be picking this one up. And like I said, if you're a scaredy cat like me and you don't like survival horror games, this is definitely one to consider, because it's not scary. It's not scary at all. But those John Williams touches and Steven Spielberg like touches are very cool to pick up on. So yeah, overall, I'd give Blue Stinger a thumbs up. And it's unfortunate that the creator didn't get to live longer. It is very Kenji Eno of him to pass away in his prime. So it's a shame.
Do you know what he died from?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't. But it's a shame. I'll have to look into it. So let's see what our Patreon supporters have to say. Because if you support us on Patreon, we will read your memories at the end of the show. So first up, we have Ando, who said, I got this game along with Sonic Adventure when I bought my Dreamcast, and boy, am I glad I did. It was like an interactive action sci-fi horror comic that didn't give a shit about anything. And I loved it for it even back then. Now looking back, I appreciate it even more as a snapshot of a time in gaming where big companies could go as balls out insane as only indie devs could afford to nowadays. Blue Stinger may not be an all-time classic within the industry, but it's an all-time classic in my heart. Sonicu says, whoa, baby, these unbelievably handsome gentlemen talking about the second most handsome Dreamcast game. I'm here for it. Hope Barry and George are doing well and looking stylish today, as we all know they are. I love Blue Stinger. When I think of Dreamcast, I think of two games primarily, which is Sonic Adventure and Blue Stinger. I love the wacky story and the setting, love the weird Christmas feeling for the game. Also love how they included Dog, a character which makes me finally feel represented as a Philly husky boy that loves karate.
Thank you, Bob, for that comment. I appreciate talking so positive about us.
Yeah, husky boys that love karate. I mean, that's all of us here. My primary memory of this game was bringing my Dreamcast to a LAN party place that had a big TV set up on a wobbly table for people that felt like bringing a console in. I played it there to celebrate the holiday season, and a fair amount of people were mesmerized by how unique the game was. Specifically with how ridiculous Dog looked when doing his sumo attack. Everyone was having a good time when suddenly the wobbly table and huge TV on it, its legs started to snap. I was barely able to run up and catch the table in time, and had to hold the whole thing up for a long while people rushed to find something to support the table. To this day, I'm not sure why they didn't just grab the TV set and set it on the floor instead of making me hold it up for however long, but I guess this is the nature of man. Great show, boys. Always a treat. Looking forward to SEGA talking to you guys in a SEGA bit. Much love. I've never heard someone put it like that. SEGA talking. I like that. Alex Hughes said, I bought this game a few years ago around the same time I started reading the manga Gyo, which has some similarities along with the main character Tadashi looking similar to Elliot. I wasn't expecting much and enjoyed it and its goofy nature and have not finished it yet. Now for my favorite memory of the game has to be that time not too long ago when I took my Dreamcast over to my childhood Sonic friend Nick's place and decided to change up the lineup from the usual stuff. We played Blue Stinger, was one of the games I brought along with Daytona USA and Sega Marine Fishing, and he enjoyed it. So I shall definitely plan to bring it again the next time he plans a retro games and breakfast gathering. With it being a holiday season, I will definitely want to find time to play it and actually finish it. But despite that, it's still somewhere on my favorite Dreamcast game list, but not as high as Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 or Phantasy Star Online. And lastly, we have Zachary Ross, who says, mutants, vending machines, angelic beings, guns, and Christmas. These are probably the inspirations drawn out of a Sega hat that created the junk food game Blue Stinger that we know today. It could never be redone now, and it's a good question to ask why it was even created back in the good old days of the Dreamcast. Nonetheless, those who have played it will appreciate it for what it is. Blue Stinger to me is like the delicious but somewhat off-putting frosting you find on a cake you can buy from the grocery store. I always want another spoonful, but I know it's bad for me, and I know that if I pay a little more, I could probably get the cheesecake instead. But man, do I love colorful, thick, oily frosting. I bought Blue Stinger as my first Dreamcast game, the only reason being that Sonic Adventure was out of stock. It didn't disappoint me, though. I had a wonderful time with the game. The graphics were still novel, the story and gameplay mechanics were bonkers. Even as a video game-deprived child, I knew it was an unconventional game right from the beginning. Now, as an adult, it's very nostalgic. It still brings a smile to my face when I revisit it every December, as it's one of the greatest Christmas games ever created. If you're looking for a little holiday cheer, sit back, crack open a Hazy, and experience the magic of Christmas with Blue Stinger.
And
so there we go.
And I will say, Nishigaki died of a heart attack at his home at age 42. So thank you for all the great.
Whoa.
So thank you for the game and the great memories. What do we?
Yeah, Kenji Eno. He passed away at 42.
Yes, that's weird.
Of hypertension,
right?
Or a heart attack. These game developers overwork. I mean, the dude worked 2 years straight on this game, taking a few days off.
Smoking cigarettes and probably eating out all the time is not great for you.
Yep. But George, you next time you're asking, The schedule says we're recording it on Christmas Eve. I don't think that's happening. We'll figure out the schedule.
Else, yeah.
But the game is going to be Bulk Slash. Do you know what that is?
Yes, it's the Sega Saturn Japanese game that has recently gotten a fan patch that's been translated to English and is 100% worth trying out.
Nice, and that's from Hudson Soft, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
So
I'm looking forward to discussing that. Yeah, it's our triple B. We've done what did we do? Border Break, Blue Stinger, Bulk Slash.
Lots of mechs in for me in my future. So thanks everyone for listening. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye.